Okay, so I had a pretty idyllic childhood. First slide. Living in the Huon Valley in southern Tasmania. So my parents both worked full-time, but we lived on a small farm, so they farmed out of hours, and my sister and I would spend our hours riding our ponies through the local apple orchards. So life was pretty good. Then when I was about 11, things changed. So over the next year, maybe 2, the farm and my beloved pony Firecracker were sold, and we moved to the city. So my parents loved me, but they no longer loved each other. And I was thrown into a world of uncertainty. Not kicking and screaming, that was more my sister's style. But I felt things really big and really deeply. So I was already a really shy kid, but I became an observer, a peacekeeper, and I just tried to blend into the background. So during my teenage years, I watched my mum reinvent herself. She was incredibly focused and building herself up. She worked full-time and went to business school at night. So she was driven to do and to be more. And it was during this time that I learned how to be independent. I attended an all-girls Catholic school, and my friends were daughters of politicians and lawyers. But I felt really out of place, but I learnt how to keep up without the same means. So I loved to draw and to create things, but I was a really analytical thinker, and my teachers at high school decided that a science degree was in my future. I enrolled in things like advanced mathematics and computer programming, but psychology because it always also sounded really interesting to me. And that first year, I failed everything. Everything except psychology, because that was the only interesting thing I was doing. So inspired by my mum, I started a night course, and a night course in something that I was also interested in, which was graphic design. And I went on to a fine arts degree, and 3 years later was keen to graduate, but then came my next big failure. I failed my 3rd year drawing class. Not because I didn't have the work or the ability, I failed on attendance. I was devastated. I wouldn't be able to graduate, but then I remembered psychology. I was able to use the points from my 1st year psychology class to pass and get my Bachelor of Fine Arts. So I moved to Melbourne. Because everyone left Tasmania back then. So I started my first real job as a designer, and I was set up at a party with my first real boyfriend, a Kiwi no less. And in my job, I was a new girl. I was really eager to learn and really eager to please. I became the boss's little pet, much to the disgust of my workmate, the senior designer. She was a real bitch to me. But I learned a really strong work ethic from my parents, and I just got on with it, and I eventually wore it down with kindness. It was here that I learnt to apply my overthinking analytical brain to enhance my design. 3 years later, my boyfriend and I moved to London, where I got a job at T&T magazine, and it was my first introduction to publishing. I loved it. The people, the place, the vibe, beer o'clock. And I got to watch people reading and interacting with my designs on the tube every day. Plus, I got my first billboard. It was a real buzz. But when I tried to resign, I was taking 6 weeks away to go and get married. They wouldn't accept it. They wanted me to come back because they valued my work ethic and my ability, and that was an even bigger buzz. So I did eventually leave and move to a bigger publishing house in King's Cross as an art editor of a science journal. My husband and sister are both scientists, so science is a big part of my life, and I was using that analytical brain. So after 4 years in London and 3 years married, the clock was ticking and the yearning to return down under to settle down. So my husband got a job in Auckland, and it was close enough from my home to be acceptable, plus he's a Kiwi, so someone had to compromise. And I landed a job at a small design studio and publishing house in Ponsonby. So I worked my butt off, and I spent a lot of time working overtime to meet deadlines. It was really hard, the boss was super tough, but I was really challenged and I felt as an integral part of the small team. We developed a new magazine, something new for New Zealand, and I was promoted to art director. And in the early days of that magazine, I was art director, senior designer, production assistant, retoucher, photographer, you name it. But the magazine received rave reviews and I won my first award for cover design at the Qantas Media Awards in 2006. So when I was made redundant in early 2007, 3 months after miscarrying my first child, I hit rock bottom. I'd never felt so devalued in all my life. After working so hard, it felt really personal, and I felt like they weren't interested in investing in me, even after I'd worked my butt off. But I had other things to focus on because I was pregnant again. So applying for another job just was not an option. I just didn't have faith that somebody would hire me knowing I'd have to go on maternity leave. So I'm hoping that mentality has changed. So my only option was to set out on my own, and I started my first business as a graphic designer. But over the next 2 years, I had 2 babies, so growing a business was just not a priority. I was only working part-time around the kids, but I wanted to do more and I wanted to be more, like my mum had all those years ago. And so it was always in the back of my mind that I had to keep going to further myself. And it was around this time that I met and became friends with Bex Lipp, my business partner. Fast forward a couple of years to 2012, and Bex and I started a blog together. It all happened pretty quickly, and if you know Bex, you'll know that when she gets an idea, she runs with it, and fast. So this was a really great distraction for me. And Bex introduced me to the idea of practicing gratitude and the law of attraction. So I think Brow talked about law of attraction. So she had been using gratitude for many years as therapy for her own mental health struggles. And I was fascinated by her unending ability to look on the bright side of everything. So at this time, I created my first vision board and I set goals for the future. And the one that stands out is I want to use my design skills to help people. But I had no idea how I was going to do that. So it was during one of our weekly catch-ups when Bex asked me to design her a gratitude journal, and we were trying to think of ideas to monetise the blog, to turn it from a hobby into a business. So at first I wasn't keen because producing books is really expensive, and I thought it was a bit of a hippie concept. But being from a science background, I did my own research, and if you haven't Googled it, you don't know about it, please do, because it blows my mind. The changes to the mind and the body is just amazing. So I soon found an online print-on-demand service and got 25 printed, and then 50 more, and then 50 more, and they just kept selling out. So we'd realised this was bigger than the blog, so we started a new business, and we invested in 2,000 books. So this was at the end of 2015, and we've since sold over 12,000, and we're winning awards. So but what I haven't mentioned is, during the last 10 years, I was also going through some huge personal battles. So someone very close to me attempted suicide a number of times. I knew they were struggling, but I really had no idea how or if I could help. I've never felt those truly black feelings that people have depression describe, but I could offer support. I could validate their feelings, and I could offer hope that things would get better. So building this business is what is an extension of that idea. I want to be able to offer hope to others, to offer resources and tools like our journals to reach people before they are in crisis. It's a problem in New Zealand and Australia that people just don't know where to go or what to do unless they're at crisis point. So I want to make a difference to those people and to others like me supporting those people, and that's what I'm doing. So, finishing, embrace your failures, open your mind, work hard, be kind. You never know what others are going through. And it is the best feeling ever to be able to help people by doing what you love.